Well, one of those games that Armis Thomas needs to have a big one. That's Auburn. We'll discuss the big questions and keys to that as we take our post-spring look at the Auburn Tigers coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there tuning in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jay, the Auburn Tigers will come to Norman this year for Oklahoma's first SEC game this season, and there will be a familiar face at quarterback in Jackson Arnold with a dynamic wide receiver group featuring Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton, the Georgia Tech transfer, who was considered by many the top wide receiver transfer in the 2024-2025 offseason. So, Jay, as you kind of take a look at this game from a 10,000-foot view, what do you think of the Auburn Tigers as we sit here in May?
Yeah, coming into this year from after, of course, last season or whatnot, Cam Coleman being a returning starter, they're bringing a pretty veteran offensive line with some additional transfers. So you've got, 3 offensive linemen that are returning starters. You're bringing, Brandon Frazier over at tight end. And for them, the biggest thing is, what's that running back group going to look like with Jackson Arnold? But the good thing for Jackson Arnold, like you mentioned, he's got some really good wide receivers that's going to be around him, and Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton Jr., the Georgia Tech transfer, and a solid offensive line. Now he's going to have to play at the level that's required to be considered successful when you're bringing in that many returning starters and stuff, and that many returning components. So on the offensive side of the ball, they brought in a lot of transfers over the last couple of years, and so we have to see if they're going to actually be able to put up the numbers that's needed in order to be successful for the year. The expectation, I think 8.5 or 7.5 is the number that Vegas FanDuel has for their win total for next year. And so there's kind of no excuse, John, if we're really thinking about it. They got a favorable schedule to do it. But when I'm looking at it just at the top, having an offensive line with consistent guys over 600 snaps, even though some are transfers, if they gel early, they should win a lot of games.
I mean, the situation is better for Jackson Arnold going into this season than it was for any quarterback. Mm-hmm. It would have been last year for Oklahoma because it was just not good. It was not set up well because the offensive line was banged up. The wide receiver room was banged up, and it was going to be inexperienced. And so it's a better situation for him. So I think that puts a little bit more onus on Oklahoma's defense to have to contain what I think is still a talented dude. I get it. Last year was not good. It was not a great showing from Jackson Arnold, but he did have some moments that you saw the talent on display. And I think the biggest question comes with Oklahoma's cornerback room, with Eli Bowen, Gentry Williams, maybe Kendall Dolby getting some outside looks, the guys that are true freshmen behind them, the Jeremiah Newcomb that was part of that 2024 recruiting class, hopefully stepping up and earning some opportunities, Jacoby Johnson, the former four-star. How well do they perform against Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton? Because we know that Auburn's going to have good playmakers. They generally do. That's a team that typically has good wide receiver play. The question is, what's the quarterback going to look like? And what's the offense under Hugh Freeze going to look like? Are they going to make boneheaded mistakes? Are they going to throw interceptions? And that's going to be the key for Jackson Arnold. Can he avoid the turnover? Can he avoid seeing ghosts against that Oklahoma defense? Can he take in the pressure of playing on Owen Field once again? It's going to be very mental for him. But for Oklahoma's cornerback room, slowing down those wide receivers is going to be really, really key because they're going to be able to get open. It's just limiting how much they get open and how quickly they get open so that Jackson Arnold's forced to hold the ball beyond 2.5, closer to 3 seconds and go through his progressions.
Yeah. It's going to be important for him to make the right decisions with enough veteran savviness at wide receiver that he can take some risks. He wasn't trying to make very many risks last year either. That was another situation similar to the Michael Hawkins piece. Jackson Arnold was not trying to be a risk taker. He's going to have to in this offense. He's got dudes that are pretty dynamic that if he takes enough risk, they can make up for some mistakes that he makes. So we'll be able to see if he's comfortable when it comes to that. So he'll have the opportunity, but he's going to have to go out there and really sling it in a lot of places that he may not be as comfortable as he was last year. He's going to have to be comfortable doing it this year.
Well, and going up against Brent Venables and that defense, I think it's going to create some problems for him. Like as good as the wide receivers are, as good as the offensive line could be, and again, as talented as I think Jackson Arnold is, they're going to create some problems for him. They know. And again, so much of it is about, for him, mentality. And on the defensive side, facing an Auburn defense that is going to be pretty good. That's generally not usually the issue at Auburn, right? Their defense usually comes together and is pretty good. We saw it last year. They were able to slow Oklahoma's offense down, but Oklahoma was able to make enough plays to win the game. It's just now you're going to have to find more consistency throughout the game against the Auburn Tigers. But again, it comes back to John Mateer being a more experienced quarterback, Jay not being an experienced running back, and then having an offensive line that right now is healthy and is cohesive and is able to build on what they did in the spring. Hold all that together, keep them healthy through the first 5-6 weeks of the season, and you're going to see a much different offense than what we saw against Auburn last year.
Yep. And that's the good thing for us on the offensive line is we're bringing back so many snaps. On our returning players, you had Fabichi Wewu, of course, played in 13 starts. He played every game last year. He's your most consistent. When Troy Everett got back from injury, he played every game. So he had 8. Jacob Sexton had 8 in between being hurt and not hurt. Logan Howland gave you 11. So did Heath Lazida. They had some cleanup surgeries on the shoulders as they were wearing braces all year. But they're bringing back additional. So you had 3 dudes that had over 10 starts and a lot of SEC experience. The question is, do they build up on that and become better? And now they're going up against a really good defensive line in practice, which arguably might be one of the best, if not the best, in the SEC. That's a key thing. That should be able to be an iron sharpens iron situation. And we kind of saw that with them, John. We saw them improve as the season progressed. It just sucked that you started to see that they were hurt. But I think you got yourself a better 2 deep to handle that. And so going up against Auburn's defensive front, you should be able to slow them down enough and open holes, especially for like a Jaden Ott. That's the one thing that a lot of teams are going to have some struggles with. And I actually think Auburn will struggle with us because looking at their 2 deep, they got a lot of freshmen and transfers in their 2 deep on the defensive side of the ball, which not a bad thing, while at the same time, it's a lot of people that don't know each other or learning the defense or, trying to learn something new. It may take a year for them to fully gel there. I think we've hit our year of gelling because we didn't really have to go grab a whole bunch of players in the portal on defense. We brought in 2 guys that are pretty dynamic, but they just add you an additional wrinkle to what you already have. A defense that was really, really solid and actually pretty darn good that people didn't expect. That's what Auburn's trying to build now. So you bring in a bunch of transfers and trying to, clean up, fix a lot of that stuff. We'll see. They brought in 19 transfers. They lost 28 kids, but everybody did. But their returning production's pretty high. 22nd in the country at 65%. 21 in the country at 70% on offense. So they're bringing back a lot of really good production. And that mainly on that's that offensive line. So and the defense is 48th, which is not too far from Oklahoma, they're at 59%. So Auburn's bringing back some really good talent. They're bringing back a more veteran-savvy team, which is why they have a 7.5 win total. The question is going to be, what does the quarterback play look like between Jackson Arnold, Ashton Daniels, as well as Deuce Knight? And then if one of them emerges as the starter, they could on the back end rattle off a bunch of big-time wins to end the season.
Yeah, so the key matchup for me is looking at Oklahoma's offensive line against Keldrick Falk. Comes back after 45 pressures last year, and they're going to be relying on some younger guys at linebacker, guys with not as much experience. but they do have some veterans in the secondary. But that matchup against Falk is going to be the one that I think Oklahoma has to win if they want to keep John Mateer upright and keep that offense clicking and moving with consistency in that game. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Make sure you follow Jay over at Unfair Sports. Check out his channel, Unfair Sports, on YouTube. You can follow me over at the social medias at John 9 Williams. And you can read my work covering the Sooners at Sooners Wire. The show is at Locked On Sooners. That's the one that's next. Thank you. Sorry. It's a little early this morning. We're recording on the Wednesday morning. Follow us on all the socials at Locked On Sooners. Also go check out Locked On Thunder with the phenomenal Ryland Styles to take you through every single post game through the Western Conference Finals and what maybe will be a finals run for the young Oklahoma City Thunder. Do that over at Locked On Thunder. Also go check out the portal with our guy Brian Harris, taking you through all of the ins and outs of the transfer portal, high school recruiting. And listen, don't listen to them about Bo Bentley and LSU. Oklahoma is just as good of an option as LSU is, but that's another story. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. We'll talk to you then. Boomer
Sooner. You got to have some negative press to go with all this Oklahoma hype.
It's fine. Everything's fine. Oklahoma is still quarterback university.
It is.